Welcome to Asian American Life. I'm your host, Ernabel Demillo. To kick off the spring season, we're at the New York Botanical Garden celebrating the 15th annual Orchid Show, featuring flowers from Thailand. Did you know that Thailand is the largest exporter of orchids in the United States? In this edition, we take a look at Asian Americans making headlines in politics, social justice, and the arts. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook for more information at Asian American Life. But stay tuned. Here's what's coming up on our show.
Bought and sold, Minnie Roh's exclusive report on sex trafficking. Kyung Yoon reports on who's who in Trump's administration. East meets West, Tinabeth Piña's untold history of Koryo Sarams. And fighting global poverty one wage at a time. This and more on Asian American Life.
I'm Minnie Roh. The words human trafficking and sexual slavery may conjure up images of young children in third world countries or something that only happens in seedy red light districts. But the truth is, sex trafficking is happening all around us. And as you're about to hear in this first-hand account by a sex trafficking survivor, it may even be happening right in your own neighborhoods.
You know, the power of US and the United States is the destination of the dream. Because United States is a dreamland for everybody, especially Asian people.
When Shandra Woworuntu lost her financial analyst job following the Indonesian economic crisis in 1998, she looked to the land of opportunity, the United States, to find a job.
I have young child that need to be protected, need to be loved, and also how I can provide the best education for her.
She paid a recruiter in her country $3,000 US to help her start her new life in America. The agency got her working papers and what seemed to be a great job offer as a waitress at a hotel in Chicago, making $5,000 a month.
While I was working in Indonesia, I make only $250 a month. But I was thinking, in America, we earn so much money.
Her plan was to work for 6 months and then return to get a local job and raise her 3-year-old daughter, who she had to leave behind with her mother. So she left Indonesia, full of hope and excitement about her new adventure. She was 24 years old and had never been to the United States before.
I was a young woman and think I will meet Whitney Houston. I will meet many different movie stars, artists, singers. I didn't think about the bad thing.
She flew into John F. Kennedy Airport in New York City, and a man named Johnny Wong, who had a copy of her passport and her picture, picked her up. He told her it was too late to fly to Chicago, and she needed to spend the night in New York. Then Chandra says they drove to the hotel in Flushing, Queens, where they met another man.
Johnny said, I have to stay overnight with that guy. And I saw from inside the car window, that man handed a big envelope of money to Johnny, and Johnny counted the money. So I realized it is a business, but I didn't know.
Then, over the course of a few hours, these transactions happened 3 more times, each time getting more severe, until finally Chandra found herself at gunpoint, forced into a house where they took her passport, ticket, and all her belongings.
And he said, Mama-san, a new girl. I realized that I was in the situation because I learned Mama-san was a person who ran prostitution or a brothel. And I saw a little girl was abused and her face was sliced and another person beat her up with the baseball bat and another room scream, another room giggle. So I didn't know how to describe this place, but it wasn't a house. It wasn't a workplace.
Shandra says her traffickers then told her she owed them $30,000, and every man she serviced would knock off $100 from her account. The next few months of her life were a blur of near starvation.
I ate only plain rice soup with yellow pickles.
A mixture of drugs and alcohol to keep her peppy and awake.
Every midnight, after 12 o'clock, they ask me to dress nice. They escort me to the hotel, to the casino, and they bought my body.
And severe abuse, physical, verbal, and sexual, not only from her traffickers, but from her buyers as well.
45 minutes, they can do whatever they want with my body. If they want to abuse me, they abuse me. They slap me, they slap me. They whip me, they whip me. That's it. Besides, I was weak. So whatever they want, I have to do it. They treated me like a dog. They treated me like an animal. I wasn't human. I couldn't do anything. If I fight, I scream, it will not good because I already saw many people scream, many people fight, and what they got? Abuse. And I want to go back home for my daughter.
Unfortunately, this narrative is all too common, particularly among Asians who flock to these shores looking for a better life. The U.S. State Department estimates that annually 200,000 women and children are trafficked in this country. 17,500 of them are foreign nationals, mostly from China, Mexico, and Russia. Globally, the numbers are staggering. According to the International Labor Organization, a United Nations agency, 21 million people, or 3 out of every 1,000 people worldwide, are victims of forced labor. And it's a huge business, worth about $150 billion. It ranks among the top 3 most profitable criminal enterprises, along with drugs and arms.
The U.S. definition of trafficking, key terms there are force, fraud, and coercion to extract labor or sex from someone else for your commercial benefit, or a minor.
Jimmy Lee is the executive director of Restore NYC, a nonprofit organization that focuses specifically on foreign nationals who are victims of sexual trafficking. He says contrary to the common perception that sex trafficking victims are mostly young women or underage children, the average age of his clients is 37, and most of them are mothers.
There's no single story that ties them all together, but what we've seen is becoming moms have actually made them more vulnerable because they're so desperate to provide for their kids.
And Lee says sex trafficking takes on many different forms. There are residential brothels, like the one where Shandra was entrapped, illicit massage parlors. Lee says these are an Asian specialty. Strip clubs, pornography, and livery cabs which transport the victim to and from locations. And the degree of trauma for the victims also differs wildly.
There are cases where guns are put to people's heads or they're beaten, but I think we don't want to underestimate just how powerful coercion is to make a vulnerable person do something she doesn't want to do.
Restore NYC's mission is to transition the victim into a survivor, connecting them to much-needed resources such as housing, legal and psychological counseling, job training, and employment. In order to receive resources, however, the victim must agree to cooperate with law enforcement, which Lee says has become increasingly more challenging in this current political climate.
We've recently had women come to us and say, I'm a trafficking victim, but I will not cooperate with law enforcement because I don't have my papers and I'm so afraid to, cooperate with law enforcement. And then we're sort of stuck.
That's a building, and for days, weeks.
Chandra's flight from her tormentors is just as dramatic and terrifying as her captivity. She took us to the brothel in Sunset Park, Brooklyn, where she says she made her escape by breaking through that tiny bathroom window on the second story.
I said, in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, amen. I jumped and I was alive. It was a miracle that from that window, I didn't get any scratch, I didn't get any fracture.
But in an unbelievable twist, Shandra says when she went to the police and the Indonesian consulate to report her ordeal, no one believed her or offered any help.
I was so angry, besides sad, because no one identified me as a victim and need help. I didn't give up. I begged the food, I slept at the park, I was homeless, really homeless.
Finally, after a few weeks, she met a man named Eddie who listened to her story, called the FBI, and the police busted the operation.
It was like a movie. Many police officers undercover came to that brothel and I was there. It was the happiness, it was joy. I cannot describe how freedom looked like. When you are trapped, your freedom taken, and you gain strength and you experience, you get back that freedom. It is wonderful.
Shandra worked with law enforcement to put her captors behind bars, and in exchange for her cooperation, she was granted a T visa, which allowed her citizenship and to bring her daughter to the United States. She then began the process of picking up the pieces of her life. She had another child, Nicholas, who is now 10, and runs a nonprofit organization, Mentari Human Trafficking Survivor Empowerment, so that, unlike her, victims can get the help they need.
I believe to end human trafficking globally, the United States government needs to focus on prevention.
On the federal level, she has testified before Senate, worked on the Survivor Empowerment Bill that President Obama signed into law in 2015, and appointed to the U.S. Advisory Council on Human Trafficking. She stresses that education and prevention are the main keys to eliminating this global crime.
This is our responsibility to end. This is our responsibility to protect a victim. This is our responsibility to prosecute trafficker and sex buyer. And we come together to educate our community and raise awareness so no more people will get into the same situation what I did.
The estimated number of people trafficked globally, 21 million, is more than the number of slaves brought to America during the Mid-Atlantic movement in the 17th and 18th centuries. It's no wonder that human trafficking is often referred to as modern-day slavery. I'm Minnie Roh for Asian American Life. I'm Kyung Yoon. Asian American appointees in the Trump administration. A few are familiar faces, while others are new to the national stage. We'll take a closer look.
George Conway, the husband of White House counselor Kellyanne Conway, is the latest Asian American named by President Trump to a high-profile position in his administration. The Filipino-American attorney is slated to lead the Department of Justice's Civil Division. Pending a Senate confirmation, he would join the ranks of other power players of Asian descent in the White House. Elaine Chao was sworn in as Secretary of Transportation in January, making history as the first Asian American woman to serve in 2 presidential cabinets, having been Secretary of Labor under President George W. Bush. Now, the Washington insider and wife of the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is set to play an influential role in the Trump administration, one that has touted investments in infrastructure as being a key focus. Chao is not the only Asian American woman to fill a high-level position within the administration.
I come before you today.
Former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley, who describes herself as the proud daughter of Indian immigrants, is Trump's appointee as the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations.
It is humbling to be part of a body whose responsibility is nothing less than maintaining international peace and security.
Those are 2 very high-level appointments. Those are basically the highest appointments that can be made in our government. And it's important for, I think, Asian Americans to see people that look like themselves in the government.
Charles Tien is a professor of politics at Hunter College. He says that for too long, not only Asian Americans, but minorities in general have seen a white-dominated government that doesn't look like them. So when they do see Asian American leaders in positions of influence, it can make them feel more empowered and included.
The fact that you see somebody that looks like you working in the government only increases, I think, your satisfaction and your trust in that government.
This is sure to be a question for many Asian American voters. According to national polls, more than 2/3 of them supported Hillary Clinton over Donald Trump.
So in terms of their politics, these Asian American appointees may not really reflect Asian American community interests, right?
This doesn't necessarily have to be a partisan thing. You can be a Democrat, you see faces that look like you, even if it's of the other party. Right? It can have an effect on how you feel about the government. When you come to the table, not just bringing yourself as a minority, right? You're bringing your past history with you. That undoubtedly influences your point of view.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's my privilege to introduce the Administrator of the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, Seema Verma.
Another high-level Asian American appointee is Seema Verma, who worked with Vice President Mike Pence when he was governor of Indiana to create an alternative statewide Medicaid expansion plan designed to appeal to conservatives. She now leads the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid.
The FCC, as you know, as you mentioned, proposed rules last year to try to flesh out what our rules should be.
And Ajit Pai is the new chairman of the Federal Communications Commission, whose voting record and public statements signal that he will steer the agency in a more pro-industry direction.
The question is, are these Asian American voices in the administration, are they presenting opposing viewpoints, right, for Donald Trump to consider? All presidents, I think, are better served when they have wide range of voices in their inner circle.
Many are scrutinizing who are the real power players with influence in a Trump administration. For Asian American leaders working within this administration, it'll be interesting to see what kind of voices they'll be able to lend to shaping policy. I'm Kyung Yoon for Asian American Life.
Koryo Saram, also known as Koreans from the Soviet Union, have found a second home right here in the United States. This is their untold story.
When you think of Russian-American culture, you picture Brighton Beach, Brooklyn, with all its cuisine and vibrant culture. But did you know that it's also home to hundreds of Koryo Sarams, Koreans from the Soviet region who immigrated to New York nearly 20 years ago? Not everything is lost in translation. Their native tongue is Russian. Their names are multi-ethnic. Food is a fusion of Korean Russian, and businesses are bicultural. In Park Slope, Brooklyn, the All Nations Baptist Church, led by Pastor Leonid Kim, a Koryo Saram, is one of the largest multi-ethnic Russian churches in New York, representing nearly 10 nations, including Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, Ukraine, and Uzbekistan.
Many Koreans, they won the green card lottery. They are trying to come to America. After Gorbachev and after 2001, second, in Uzbekistan and Russia, it's very, very difficult time for a Korean economic and down, no job, no money, and Koreans start to looking for some place on some country where they could make money.
Both my parents had engineering degrees and they had jobs in engineering, high ranking. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 91, 92, both my parents lost their jobs. And I know it was because of our race, and that's what my dad said as well.
Yulia Kim left Uzbekistan at age 9 with her family in search of better opportunities and settled in Queens, New York.
When we came to the States, I think due to the lack of language, they really struggled, and Korean community is not going to really support us because we're not that Korean. And I think there was always some kind of distrust with Russian communities too, because we're not entirely Russian. Definitely not Uzbek. And so I think for my parents, it was really vital to find people like us.
So what's the backstory behind Koryo Saram? How did this population end up in countries like Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and the Soviet region? It's an untold history that dates back as far as the 19th century.
The Koreans started moving to Far East Russia due to bad economic conditions in the 1880s. Of course, in 1910, after the annexation of Korea from Japan, many more Koreans fled the Japanese occupation into that area.
Professor David Chung documented their harrowing exodus in his film, Koryo Saram, The Unreliable People. He exposes the atrocities Joseph Stalin committed on the Korean people, whom he thought were a Japanese threat.
And every Korean, due to their race, was taken out of that area by train, and they were dispersed throughout Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan.
Historians consider it one of the first ethnic cleansings of the 20th century.
There were groups of 40,000 or 30,000 in some areas. They had nothing. They had no buildings. They dug holes to live in the ground, and they survived like that for 2 or 3 years. Many thousands died during the first couple of winters.
Yulia's grandparents were part of Stalin's deportation. They were on the ghost trains, a death sentence.
They were given like 24 hours to basically evacuate and take something like these ghost trains or cargo trains, and they were basically shipped off to what is now Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan.
Those who survived were stripped of their Korean heritage and forced to farm barren lands in the Russian region.
My grandparents grew up in severe poverty. Like, I had no clue until a conversation I had recently, but you know, you would share one pair of shoes, or you didn't know when you were going to eat sometimes.
This devastating chapter in history remains hidden as survivors try to erase their memories of deportation and ethnic cleansing.
Through conversations with my parents, I realized that they were a little bit hesitant to share some parts of their history, and I would really have to press and ask, well, why or where.
But scholars like Professor Chung are ensuring their stories get told. And the next generation of American Koryo Sarams are keeping their culture alive in America.
And I think in some ways, Russian culture is not as emotional, I would say, as American culture. I dive deep into my emotions, but I think my parents almost had to back off from that and process things differently.
For Asian American Life, I'm Tinabeth Piña.
One Day's Wages' mission is to end extreme global poverty. It all started when a family decided to donate a year's wages in hopes of inspiring others to simply donate one day's wages. Here's more.
One Day's Wages is a nonprofit, grassroots humanitarian organization that my wife and I and our 3 kids started in 2008. We started One Day's Wages because we wanted to remind people, including ourselves, that all of us were philanthropists. One of the reasons why we also started One Day's Wages is because of my parents' story. They were very, very poor. My father grew up in what is now called North Korea, fled down when he was a kid, and yet in the midst of poverty, I respect and I appreciate the fact that there were people who assisted them in some way or the other. So as a Korean American who came to this country at the age of 6, not knowing a single word of English, but because of my parents' sacrifice, to be able to live out and pursue opportunities and convictions and dreams. I'm not a millionaire, I'm not a celebrity, but I went to college. I have a beautiful family. I get to pastor an amazing church. And so as I'm grateful and I thank God for all the blessings in my life, I want to make sure that I don't ever tell my church to do something I'm not willing to do ourselves. My wife and I, after seeing people suffer through extreme poverty in other parts of the world, we spent some time thinking, praying about what we should do, how we should respond, and we were convicted to give up a year's wages. And I say that not to be boastful, but it took us 3 years to simplify our lives, to save as much as we could. And after 3 years, we donated 1 year's wages. And then we tried to invite as many people as possible to consider giving just 1 day's wages. And 100% of that donation would go to partner with organizations around the world to empower those who are living in extreme poverty. And in 6 years, we're marking our 7th year in 2016. But it's been just humbling and amazing to see so many people from over about 50 countries. We've raised nearly $5 million. And again, it's a response to conviction about mercy, justice, and compassion.
That's our show for now. If you want more information on the segments in this edition, follow us on Facebook at Asian American Life. And be sure to stop by the beautiful Orchid Show Thailand here at the New York Botanical Garden. I'm Ernabel Demillo. We'll see you next time.